the News Channel 5 network, this is Morningline with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morningline. Nick Barris here on a Tuesday. We've got a good show on tap. I'm going to tell you right now, when we put on the screen the numbers or the names of the people, that's called a font. And every once in a while, the machine that generates those fonts just goes belly up. Don't ask me why. We're working on it. It may get fixed. But that means I will tell you who's on the show, and I will also give you the phone number. Many of you know, but if you want to join in the conversation, 737-PLUS, 737-7587, area code 615. Now, you know who I am. I'm Nick Barris, but I'm going to have to introduce our guest to you. There's no font for his name, but I'll try to spell it for you. His first name, Daron, is not spelled the typical way, but it's Davidson County Sheriff Daron Hall, and it's D-A-R-O-N. Good morning. It's a little different.
It is a little different.
You make sure to have that font right.
Between that and the word sheriff, one of them is misspelled everywhere I go. Those are hard words.
What is it normally? D-A-R-R-E-N or something like that?
You get that one a lot, but I mean, I'm not kidding you. I have, I don't know, over the years, plaques or some presentation. I remember the governor one time misspelled sheriff. I've had schools. The word is a little tricky. 2 R's, 2 F's.
I guess, but still, you got to spell sheriff, right? Man. Well, anyway, the sheriff's here. We can take your phone call, 737-7587 throughout the show, but lots to talk about. I saw, it was interesting. I had thought about this gentleman recently, and I saw you met with him, was it yesterday, with former Senator Bill Frist?
Right.
What is he up to?
You know, he's working with the healthcare company, and obviously has a history with that subject. And we have a mutual friend that kind of connected us up with our mental health efforts.
That's what I was going to talk to you about, yeah.
Yeah, and really, gosh, I was just, he's just a wealth of knowledge. And we sit down, and I was talking about, federally, there's some issues we're trying to deal with to improve what is kind of it's a hang-up, really. The word inmate is stuck in the Social Security Act. And it says that you're not eligible for Medicaid if you are, quote, an inmate. Now, I know people might think, well, they shouldn't get this and that. Well, what you don't realize is you're paying for it anyway as a taxpayer. The health care, mental health care of the inmate, you're paying for it anyway.
You pay anyway.
Right. And you're paying locally for that.
Okay.
In my budget, you're paying me to make sure they get it. Really, if you remove the word inmate, which we're working nationally to do that, the federal government would be responsible to offset the care for many of these people.
So you could get federal funds to help pay for
billions
this.
Of dollars, 8-point-something billion.
And this would be something that would be provided, billions to every facility in the country.
Right. Those people who qualify for Medicaid, and the truth is, and I'm not an expert in this, but I was working again with Senator Frist about it, just trying to ask some questions and some ideas of ways to do it. But yeah, it's a real interesting thing. I'm on a task force nationally. There's about 7 or 8 of us that are sheriffs and 7 or 8 mayors around the country, and we're on this task force, and we're trying to get that language changed. Believe it or not, what it really boils down to, you and I are driving around tonight, and we get arrested. We get arrested for a green leafy substance and whatever you want to call it, and we both go to jail for that. So when we arrive, you bond out and go home. I stay in jail. You bond out and go home, and your health care, mental health care, is paid for by the federal government if you qualify because you have addictions or because you're mentally ill, whatever. I stayed in jail. We did the same thing. We're both awaiting trial. We're not convicted. I don't get paid for. So the locals pick me up, and you get paid for.
That is interesting the way you put that. That makes me understand this better. So because of that, I'm able to bond out, and then my Medicare is going to cover me if I need that, if I meet the qualifications. You, if you're the same financial status, are still behind bars, but the taxpayer has to pick it up. You don't get Medicare.
Yeah, the local taxpayer. Right. Yeah. And the reality, all I'm trying to do is to see, and I say, we're on a task force. I think we're going to be successful. Now, Tennessee.
Now, Congress would have to pass this, wouldn't they? I mean, they'd have to get behind it.
There's a pretty serious effort to do that, though. It's bipartisan, believe it or not. The reason is a lot of these counties, the National Sheriff's Association and the National Association of Counties, NACO, have partnered on this task force. And so you have county mayors of very large cities and county sheriffs, or city sheriffs, if you will, because that's who's really impacted. It's a huge dollar amount that really needs to be offset again, we're not talking about every arrestee. We're talking about those people who qualify. A lot of these folks who are mentally ill who would receive the service as long as they're not behind bars. And you might say, well, they don't deserve it. Well, they're not found guilty yet. That's one thing to remember.
Okay, that's true.
The second thing is
you're paying for it anyway.
You're paying for it anyway. So we're trying to.
Look, if you're a taxpayer and you live locally, I mean, that sounds like a good idea. I see why lawmakers might get behind that. Now, ultimately, the money from the federal government is still coming out of tax dollars.
That's true. It's the same.
But I see where that comes from. At least it should be the same.
And you have to qualify. I'm not saying just inmates, but
not just anyone qualifies. You have to be pretty destitute to get Medicaid.
That's right.
Yeah, it's tough.
We talked to him about that, and he's he was so helpful in some even local. I don't mean local politics, but political issues with Medicaid and mental health, and he's going to partner with us and help us as we go forward, approaching opening the building next year sometime. And I just had a great conversation. I walked out and I said, he was a fantastic listener. I mean, there are people you sit down and talk to who are just very smart and have a lot of history.
Right.
And I was really really moved with the way he wanted to know.
It was a different time. And by the way, the number is 737-7587 if you want to call. I think back to these senators, and whatever your partisanship may or may not be, but I think back to a senator like Frist, who is obviously a very skilled surgeon. That guy was a great surgeon. Right. And at one point, he was one of the 3 or 4 most powerful people in the world as the majority leader in the Senate. But then him and Fred Thompson.
There you go.
And Howard Baker going back before them. That was a different time than what we have today. And, our senators today, whatever. But back then, I mean, they were real statesmen, and they were more interested in sometimes compromising. It wasn't quite so partisan. Yes, they were Republican, but I remember Fred Thompson. He just did what he thought was right, whether it angered some of his party or whether it angered the Democrats. I had to respect that man, and the same way with Senator Frist.
Yeah, and you know what I kind of long for. I'm kind of a political junkie as far as liking to watch it from the stands anyway. But Tennessee was very fortunate. I mean, we had Jim Sasser was very prominent there. You had a lot going. Of course, Al Gore. You had this state.
Ned McWhorter.
I mean, but you're talking about the state really. Out of 50 states, we had a lot of leadership built in our state from Howard Baker through all of those names. And I don't know.
Republican and Democrat.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, I remember hearing stories of when in the good old days, I guess, where the Republicans and Democrats who could argue all day but would go out at night and have dinner and at least try to work out the differences. I can't imagine there's anybody at the same dinner table anywhere today.
It's a shame.
I
miss that. And I don't want to get too much into politics, but anyway, it was interesting. It was funny. I follow you, of course, on Twitter, and I was thinking about what is Senator Frist doing, and then I saw that you were meeting with him.
Really impressed with him. He was very helpful.
Well, listen, we have to take a break, but when we come back, we want to get a little more on that facility and how it's going over there, and then talk to you about there's something going on starting Thursday, and I'm not sure what role the Sheriff's Department may have. I imagine you're involved in some way with this crazy NFL draft and security. I'll say this, and when we come back we'll talk about it. And by the way, we can take your phone calls. The number we're not able to put up, 737+737-7587, but my big concern with this is as large of a crowd as it's going to be. And I know this was in Sri Lanka and over Easter, those horrible bombings. But there's video today of some guy with a backpack who was one of the suicide. And God forbid something like this happens. But I think back to the Boston Marathon a few years back. And what we have going on here, between the music marathon, a lot of the concerts, proms going on, and then the NFL draft, which is almost on par with the Super Bowl nowadays in terms of crowd. It just worries me. And not that I think security's in place, but let's talk about that when we come back. Gosh forbid that if someone tries to do something bad, and what kind of security is in place that you can share with us. We'll take a break and be back with more with the Sheriff and your phone calls. And hey, the number's up there. Nicely done. We'll be back right after this.